President Trump just pulled back from the brink of war with Iran. But Tehran is refusing to make a deal. What happens next could change everything. On August 1, 2026, the world came closer to a full-scale war between the United States and Iran than at any point since the conflict began earlier this year. President Trump announced that he had canceled a series of planned strikes on Iran after mediators secured a framework for a deal. The agreement would reportedly include reopening the Strait of Hormuz and curbing Iran's nuclear ambitions. But within hours, Tehran publicly denied that any such agreement exists. The decision to pull back came after days of escalating rhetoric from both sides. Trump had threatened massive military action against Iranian targets, and Iran had responded with threats of its own retaliation. The United States had already been conducting airstrikes inside Iran as part of the broader conflict that began in February 2026. The back and forth between Washington and Tehran has left the Middle East and the world on edge. Every announcement, every threat, and every diplomatic signal has been scrutinized by markets, governments, and ordinary people who fear the worst. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the most critical choke points in global trade. Nearly 20% of the world's oil passes through this narrow waterway between Iran and the Arabian Peninsula. Every day, approximately 20 million barrels of crude oil and liquefied natural gas transit through this 21-mile-wide strait. Any disruption could send global energy prices soaring and trigger a worldwide economic crisis. The strait is also vital for global energy security. Countries across Asia, Europe, and the Americas depend on the oil that flows through Hormuz. A sustained closure of the strait would cause gasoline prices to spike worldwide, crippling economies from Washington to Tokyo. Saudi Arabia, the world's largest oil exporter, has the most to lose from any disruption in the Hormuz corridor. Riyadh has been quietly lobbying behind the scenes for a diplomatic solution, according to multiple sources. The kingdom's economy depends heavily on oil revenue, and a spike in global energy prices could destabilize the Saudi budget and social contract. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman reportedly spoke directly with Trump on Saturday to express concern over the plans for massive new U.S. strikes on Iran, according to Axios and Fortune. This behind-the-scenes diplomacy appears to have been the key factor in pulling Trump back from the brink. The Saudi intervention is significant because it represents a rare moment of direct communication between the kingdom and the White House on Iran policy. Saudi Arabia has been pursuing a delicate balancing act, trying to maintain its alliance with the United States while also avoiding a full-scale war that could destabilize the entire Middle East. The Crown Prince's message to Trump was reportedly simple: a war with Iran would be catastrophic for the global economy and for Saudi Arabia's own security. The kingdom fears that a prolonged conflict could draw in other regional powers and create a wider conflagration that could last for years. Analysts say the Saudi intervention reflects a growing recognition in Riyadh that the U.S.-Iran conflict has already gone on long enough. The war has already disrupted oil markets, strained alliances, and created a humanitarian crisis in the region. Saudi Arabia wants a return to stability, even if that means accepting some Iranian nuclear capabilities in the short term. Iran has warned Washington against any adventurous action and said it would retaliate decisively if U.S. forces followed through on Trump's threats of new attacks on Iranian targets. Iranian officials have consistently denied that any deal framework exists, calling Trump's claims fabricated and politically motivated. The Islamic Republic has been leveraging its military capabilities throughout the conflict. Iran's missile arsenal, its proxy networks across the Middle East, and its ability to disrupt shipping in the Hormuz corridor give it significant strategic leverage. Tehran appears to be betting that the United States will eventually accept a negotiated settlement rather than risk a prolonged war. Iran's strategy seems to be one of calculated defiance. By refusing to acknowledge any deal framework, Tehran is signaling that it does not need American permission to continue its nuclear program or its regional activities. This hardline stance is popular domestically, where the conflict has been framed as a defense of Iranian sovereignty against American aggression. The conflict between the US and Iran has been escalating since February 2026, when the United States and Israel launched a joint attack on Iran. Iran retaliated with its own strikes, and the fighting has killed thousands and displaced millions. The conflict has also upended the world economy, sending oil prices to record highs and triggering inflation worldwide. The timing of the crisis is not lost on observers. With midterm elections approaching in the United States, Trump faces pressure from both sides of the political spectrum. His base wants a tough stance against Iran, while independents and swing voters are increasingly concerned about the economic costs of war. Gas prices have been rising steadily throughout 2026, and the threat of a Hormuz closure has only amplified those concerns. The American public is tired of Middle East conflicts after 2 decades of war in Iraq and Afghanistan. There is little appetite for another prolonged military engagement. Iran, meanwhile, is facing its own domestic pressures. The country's economy has been battered by years of sanctions and the ongoing conflict. Inflation is running high, and ordinary Iranians are feeling the pain. The government's hardline stance on the nuclear program and its resistance to American demands remain popular among the Iranian public, but there are growing signs of fatigue with the conflict. Despite the temporary pause, experts warn that the underlying tensions remain unresolved. Iran sees strategic advantage in the current situation, particularly as midterm elections approach in the United States and gas prices have risen again. Tehran believes the U.S. political calendar is working in its favor. The question now is whether diplomacy can succeed where threats of military force have failed. With both sides dug in and the world watching, the next few days could determine whether the Middle East moves toward peace or back toward conflict. Analysts say there are 3 possible scenarios. First, a negotiated deal that reopens the Hormuz and curbs Iran's nuclear program. Second, a resumption of hostilities if negotiations fail. Or third, a frozen conflict where both sides avoid escalation but never reach a lasting agreement. The most likely outcome, according to most experts, is a prolonged period of uncertainty where neither side makes a decisive move. This would give both governments time to regroup and reassess their strategies, but it would also leave the world in a state of anxious limbo. If you want to stay updated on this developing story, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Drop a comment below. Do you think diplomacy can work with Iran, or is war inevitable? Share this video with anyone who wants to understand what's happening in the Middle East. US-Iran conflict, Trump-Iran deal, Strait of Hormuz, Middle East news, Iran war 2026, breaking news, world news, geopolitics, Saudi Arabia diplomacy.